now we're going to switch over and maybe there's overlap here.
Mhm.
Scariest moment on trail.
Yeah, I think scariest, again, kind of like, best and worst moments. I think it's changed from the beginning, and I had some actually it was funny in Washington in at Snowy Pass. There was these really great trail angels. They were the grandparents of someone who had finished the trail, and just um, lovely older couple who made food for everyone. They had a camper with a fire pit, so that was amazing to bring an electric fire pit out on trail, and we made toast, like something you could never have. um, but anyways, they were asking, and so it was kind of interesting for me at that point to like look back and realize like, oh, kind of it really has like changed. Because probably like earlier in the trail I would have been worried about water, and some scary moments just in terms of like the topography, I guess, like um not necessarily you're not necessarily going up as big inclines, but the trail itself is often very narrow. And so as like a klutzy person, like thinking I was gonna like fall down a ledge or something, that was scary. But I think at the end it definitely was more of that like weather factor that was scaring me, as well as my year, because there hadn't been a lot of snowpack before, there was really like almost no river crossings in the Sierra, which had been something I was super concerned about and then almost never came up. But in Washington, there were some river crossings, and I'm like decently afraid of heights, and really just stemming from like being scared of falling and knowing that I am a bit more klutzy. So there were sometimes like where I was like crossing a log or something, and I think you really have to like take a step back and like see how comfortable you feel in that situation. And there are bridges and things like that, or there are certain places where here's a log but you could do something else, or like I'd be totally fine like sitting and like scooting my way across and just taking extra time. But on that day that I mentioned where it was raining all day long, there was one spot, it was around the afternoon, and there was like one rock overhang. So they were like, I got there and there were about like 5 other people who were about to try to like cram into one person's tent and just like stay the night. And I was like, oh, I've like could try to set up here, but I thought that like I kind of wanted to keep going like until I was going to try to sleep, just like to keep my warmth up. Like I didn't really want to like stop. I'd barely been like eating, not drinking a ton that whole day, just because you like didn't want to stop moving. I was like, oh, I want to go, like keep going, pushing a little further. It was only like 4 or something. Ended up kind of right after that spot, there was, I forget what river, but there was a river crossing that would have been decent in general, but the river had actually risen a lot, or at least it seemed like it, and was going pretty fast from the storm that day and days before. And there was a log, but I was again worried I was going to slip. Like if there were like rocks or something is one thing, but wood can get really slippery. And I had already, fortunately not a bad river crossing, but I had already like fallen off a log at one point. And I was like, I cannot do that here. And ended up just walking across, but it was definitely like a point where the whole time through I was thinking like, is this the right decision? Like, should I just turn back and hang out with those people and wait to cross tomorrow, when it might be lower and at least like would be with a group? And ended up kept going. But it was definitely like, I'm like decently tall, and the water was like getting pretty close to like my hip area, which is like a no, like very, very dangerous. So that like looking back, I may have done things differently and, tried to play it as safe as I could in the process. But that was definitely like that was probably like scary that I did that in retrospect, scary at the moment, and probably probably the most dangerous thing I did on the trail that I regret. I'm glad it worked out and I was totally fine, but kind of regret just because of how it could have gone differently.
Definitely. Yeah. River crossings are a whole subject in itself.
Yeah.
And yeah, in Washington, I had some intense river crossings in Sierra, but in Washington, there were some as well.
Hmm.
And kind of later in the season. And I fell off, I think it was by Mount Adams. There was this
Mm.
really silty river. And, of course, I crossed on like the logs that were slick and wet, fell in. It
Hmm.
wasn't pleasant. But yeah, there are some worthy river crossings in Washington that I was not expecting. So that does sound scary. And you were alone too.
Hmm.
So yeah, that definitely in retrospect, that would be scary to think about. But I'm so glad it all worked out.
Yeah.